My name is Caleb Vance, I'm 42, and until a few months ago, I was a decorated first sergeant in the United States Army Special Forces. For 18 long years, I dedicated my entire life to military service, protecting my country on missions most people can't even imagine exist. But above all, I protected my family. My wife, Jessica, 38, and our 2 young children in our home in the suburbs of Raleigh, North Carolina. Over those nearly 2 decades of service, I developed a strategic mind literally forged on the battlefield. Complex missions in Afghanistan, clandestine operations in Iraq, situations where a miscalculation meant the difference between coming home or coming back in a coffin. Every operation required millimeter-precise planning, risk analysis, perfect execution under extreme pressure. Jessica, however, always had a completely different view of me. To her, I was just the simple soldier, too absent, too naive, too easy to fool. She had no idea what was really going through my mind all those years. I am, by nature and training, a man of action and silent planning. I learned early on to maintain absolute calm under extreme pressure, and to observe every detail, no matter how small or insignificant it may seem. This characteristic, which literally saved my life countless times in war zones, ended up becoming the fundamental basis of my personal defense. Discretion wasn't just a professional choice, it was a way of life. If you like stories of cold revenge and gripping plot twists, subscribe to the channel now. There are 2 new, unreleased stories here every day, and each one is more impactful than the last. The message that completely changed the course of my life arrived on my satellite phone while I was on a remote military base in Afghanistan, just a few hours from my flight home. It was the end of a particularly difficult 6-month mission. I was eager to see my family, hug my kids, resume my normal life. The phone screen lit up with Jessica's name, and for a moment I felt that familiar joy of hearing from home. "Don't come home. I found someone else. Derek and I are living here now." Attached to the message was a photo that made my blood run cold. Derek O'Connell, a 30-year-old former recruit, charming and opportunistic, whom I had personally trained a few years ago, smiling broadly in my favorite armchair, in my own living room, with an expression of triumph I knew well. The initial shock was completely physical. For a few seconds, I felt as if I had been shot squarely in the chest. The air seemed to leave my lungs. But then, almost instantly, my mind, conditioned by years of military training for emergency situations, took complete control of the situation. There were no screams, no tears, no despair. Just a strange calm that surprised me. It was as if something inside me had simply turned off the emotional part and turned on the practical part. "Understood," I typed back, and immediately began to think about what to do next. Jessica had just made a very serious mistake. Derek O'Connell. I remembered him well. 30 years old, he'd gone through some training with me a few years back. I always thought he was a bit slippery, you know. One of those guys who talk a good game, but you feel there's something else going on. During the time we worked together, I noticed he had a tendency to show up at other soldiers' houses a lot when they were away. Now everything made sense. Months before deploying for this mission, I started noticing something was different at home. Jessica changed her phone password. Conversations stopped when I arrived. Derek showing up at the house more often, always with some excuse. I was passing by. "I came to see how you all were doing." I started to get suspicious. In the Army, you learn to pay attention to details, especially when something doesn't add up. So, before leaving, I decided to take some precautions. First, I transferred the house into a trust. Jessica didn't understand much about legal stuff, so when I explained it was to protect our assets, she didn't question it. I also opened some accounts she didn't know about and transferred part of the money. Not all of it, just enough to protect myself if something went wrong. I installed a new security system too. I told Jessica it was because of the break-ins happening in the neighborhood. She thought it was great. What she didn't know was that the cameras recorded everything to the cloud, and I could access it from anywhere. You learn a few things when you work in security for so long. Document everything, back up important information, always have a plan B. It's not paranoia, it's just prudence. I also talked to Mark Davis, a friend who became a lawyer after leaving the Army. I explained my situation and asked him to keep an eye on things while I was away. If anything happens, I told him, you have authorization to act for me. Honestly, I hoped I was being overly paranoid. I wanted my suspicions to be wrong, but they weren't. While I was in Afghanistan, I started monitoring the home cameras in my free moments. At first, it was just to alleviate my longing, to see the boys playing, stuff like that. But soon I realized I was seeing much more than I expected. Jessica and Derek weren't just having an affair. They were planning something bigger. I saw them discussing selling the house, accessing my accounts, my veteran benefits. Derek talked as if he already owned everything, as if I were just a temporary obstacle. He won't suspect a thing, I heard Derek say in one of the recordings. These military guys are all the same. They go off to work and leave everything in their wife's hands. Jessica laughed. He's really naive. Always has been. They were so confident, so sure that I was just a dumb soldier working far from home. Derek apparently had a history of taking advantage of military wives. I found this out when I started researching him online. Several women, several similar situations. But they didn't know who they were messing with. They didn't know I was seeing everything, hearing everything, documenting everything. The message I received wasn't a surprise. It was just confirmation of something I was already expecting, and I was ready. I didn't go home. Instead, from the Charlotte airport, I called Mark Davis directly. Mark, it's Caleb. It's time. Understood, he replied, needing no further explanation. I'm already heading to the office. Do you have everything? I have everything. Photos, recordings, documents. They gave themselves away completely. Mark had experience with this kind of situation. Unfortunately, cases like mine weren't rare among veterans. He knew exactly what to do. Less than 12 hours after Jessica's message, everything began to crumble for them. Banks received court orders and immediately froze all joint accounts. The house trust was activated, preventing any sale or transfer. A restraining order was issued against Derek, prohibiting him from approaching the property. Mark worked fast and surgically. He presented all the evidence, the camera recordings showing them planning to defraud my assets, the text messages, the bank records showing attempts to access the accounts. Everything documented, everything legal, everything irrefutable. Jessica's phone exploded. The first call came at 6 in the morning. I was in a hotel in Charlotte trying to process everything that was happening. I saw her name on the screen, but I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail. Caleb, for God's sake, call me. The bank froze our account. I can't access anything. What's going on? 20 minutes later, another call. Caleb, please, I know you're seeing these calls. Call me. We need to talk. Then the messages started coming one after another. Caleb, I love you. It was all a terrible mistake. Please forgive me. I was confused. You were always far away. The boys need you. They don't understand what's happening. Derek misled me. He said he would take care of me and the kids. Each message was more desperate than the last. Jessica, who had sent me that cold message telling me not to come home, was now begging for forgiveness, for a second chance, for anything. Derek also tried to contact me, but with a completely different approach. His messages were full of thinly veiled threats. Man, you're overreacting. Let's sort this out like men. Jessica told me you've been a bit unstable since you got back from the war. Maybe you should think twice before screwing things up. I'm going to fight for custody of the kids. They deserve a present father, not a guy who's always traveling. Derek's threats only proved what I already knew. He was exactly the kind of person I imagined. Cowardly, manipulative, using intimidation tactics when things didn't go his way. My response to both of them was absolute silence. I didn't reply to a single message, didn't answer a single call. I let Mark handle all legal communication. Each attempt they made to contact me was more evidence of their desperation and lack of planning. They had completely underestimated the situation. They thought I'd come home, make a scene, maybe fight with Derek, and after a few days, everything would somehow sort itself out. They had no idea I'd been documenting everything for months. Their humiliation was swift and public. Mark presented all the evidence to the judge. Evidence of adultery, attempted fraud, conspiracy to steal assets from a war veteran. The case was so clear there was no room for argument. Jessica lost access to everything. The house, the accounts, and most importantly, she lost the chance to have full custody of our children. The judge was particularly bothered by the recordings showing her and Derek planning to use my military benefits. Derek's situation was even worse. Investigations revealed he had a pattern of behavior. Other military wives started coming forward with similar stories. Apparently, he had made it a kind of specialty, seducing women married to soldiers who were on deployment, convincing them to leave their husbands, and then trying to access the family's assets. The guy who presented himself as a new father to my children was, in reality, a predator who preyed on military families. The irony was perfect. In less than a week, Derek became persona non grata in the local community. Veterans have a very strong support network in Raleigh, and the news spread quickly. No one wanted anything to do with him. Jessica tried one last desperate move. She showed up at the hotel where I was staying. "Caleb, please, just listen to me for 5 minutes," she said when she saw me in the parking lot. For the first time since I received that message, I spoke to her. "Jessica, you had 6 months to talk to me. You chose to talk to a lawyer instead. Now I choose to do the same. But the boys will be fine. They're going to live with me." She started to cry, but I was already getting into the car. There was nothing left to discuss. 6 months later, I was living a completely different life. I retired from the Army and moved with the boys to Seattle, Washington. Far from Raleigh, far from the bad memories, far from that whole situation. With my security experience and the contacts I made during years of military service, I opened a small consulting firm specializing in data protection and residential security. Nothing too elaborate, but enough to support us comfortably. The demand was greater than I expected. Many people want to feel safe in their own homes, and I knew exactly how to do that. Most importantly, my kids were adjusting well. Tommy, 8, and Sarah, 6, were resilient as only children can be. They obviously missed their mom at first, but kids are practical. They notice when life is calmer, more stable. Jessica had the right to supervised visits once a month. She drove to Seattle, spent a few hours with the kids in a public park, always with a supervisor present. It was part of the court agreement. She lost custody because the judge deemed she had put her own financial interests above the well-being of her children. In the first few visits, she tried to talk to me, asking for a second chance, saying she had learned her lesson. I responded politely but firmly. "Jessica, we're here for the kids. Let's keep the focus on them." In time, she stopped trying. I think she finally understood there was no going back. Derek completely disappeared from our story after everything came to light. Investigations revealed that he owed money to several people, had pending labor lawsuits, and had conned at least 3 other military families in similar ways. When the military police started a serious investigation, he simply vanished. He moved to another city, changed his social media identity, became a ghost. Jessica told me during one of the visits that he abandoned her the moment he realized their plan had failed. "He said I was too stupid to have understood you weren't just any soldier," she commented, with bitterness in her voice. "He blamed me for everything." I didn't feel any satisfaction hearing that. In fact, I felt pity for her. Jessica had been manipulated by a guy experienced in deceiving people, but that didn't erase the choices she made. She chose to believe him instead of trusting me. She chose the easy way instead of talking about the problems in our marriage. A year after moving to Seattle, I received an unexpected call. It was from a lawyer representing other families who had been victims of Derek. They wanted my testimony for a criminal case against him. Apparently, the police had managed to track him to Texas, where he was trying to pull the same scam on another military family. "Mr. Vance," the lawyer said, "your case was fundamental in establishing his pattern of behavior. The evidence you collected helped identify at least 6 other victims." I testified by video conference. It was strange revisiting that whole story, but it was also gratifying to know that my experience was helping other people get justice. Derek was sentenced to 5 years in prison for fraud and extortion. Jessica was not criminally prosecuted, but had to pay a substantial fine and perform community service. The judge said she had been criminally negligent regarding the well-being of her own children. Throughout this entire process, I learned some important lessons about trust, about family, and about how to protect what truly matters in life. The first lesson was that life experience is not paranoia. When something doesn't feel right, there's usually a real reason for that feeling. My years of training taught me to pay attention to details, and that saved not only my financial life but primarily protected my children from a much worse situation. The second lesson was about documentation. In the Army, we learned that if it's not documented, it didn't happen. This mindset applied perfectly to my personal life. The cameras, the records, the legal documents, all of this was essential to prove the truth when my word was questioned. But the most important lesson was about forgiveness, or rather, about when not to forgive is the healthiest choice. Many people ask me if I had forgiven Jessica. The answer is no, and I don't feel bad about it. Forgiveness isn't mandatory, especially when the betrayal was calculated and deliberate. Jessica didn't make a mistake in the heat of the moment. She planned, conspired, lied to me and our children for months. More important than forgiving was learning to move forward without bitterness. I don't lie awake at night thinking about revenge. I don't imagine ways to harm her further. Justice has already been served, and now my focus is completely on building a new and better life for my children. 2 years after all this, my business was thriving. I had become a recognized expert in home security for veterans and their families. Many clients came to me not just for my technical competence, but because they knew I understood the specific vulnerabilities that military families face. I also started doing volunteer work with an organization that helps veterans in complicated divorce situations. My story became a case study on how to legally protect oneself before problems arise. Tommy and Sarah grew up to be confident and happy children. They know the truth about what happened, adapted for their age, of course, and understand that sometimes adults make bad choices, but that doesn't define who they are or how they should live their lives. Recently, Sarah asked me if I was sad not to have a wife anymore. No, I replied honestly. I'm happy to have you two, and I'm happy that we are safe. But don't you get lonely sometimes? She insisted with that typical childlike curiosity. Alone is different from lonely, I explained. I never feel lonely when I'm with you two. And it was true. The life we built in Seattle was simple, but it was genuine. There were no lies, no betrayals, no people pretending to be something they weren't. I learned through mutual acquaintances that Jessica eventually remarried, to a guy completely different from Derek, apparently a decent man she met after the whole scandal. I sincerely hope she has learned something from this entire experience, and that she is happy. As for Derek, he served his prison sentence and was recently released. I heard he moved to Alaska and is working on an oil rig, far from families, far from opportunities to pull his scams. Perhaps the isolation will make him rethink the choices he made in life. Looking back, I realized that that terrible message I received in Afghanistan was, in a way, a liberation. It freed me from a marriage built on lies and gave me the opportunity to build something true with my children. The greatest revenge wasn't destroying Jessica's life or seeing Derek arrested. The greatest revenge was building a better, more honest, happier life than I had before. It was proving that experience and preparation trump charm and manipulation. It was showing my children that integrity and hard work always win in the end. If you liked this story, like it, share it, and leave your comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, please subscribe and hit the bell icon to receive notifications of new stories like this. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.